It is April 7th, 2025, and I just spent 50 minutes of my life that I will never get back watching what I guess could be described as a Trump Netanyahu press conference from their meeting in the Oval Office today. Although in reality, it was just Trump fielding questions, mainly. Netanyahu barely talked. I was shocked. Well, not really that shocked, but I'm going to be getting into the highlights. I will not make you suffer through the entire thing. I'll just be talking about the highlights that were mentioned, mainly by Trump, what was said by Netanyahu that wasn't covered by the reporters in the room whatsoever, and how all of this has significance on a day like today when you have the White House now doubling down, saying they don't care about the fact that Israel just executed 15 paramedics, civil defense workers, and a UN staff member in the Gaza Strip outside of Rafah, that they don't care that the video footage shows that Israel lied about it. And that about lines up with everything that we've seen from the Trump administration as Israel took it a step further and murdered a 14-year-old American citizen in the West Bank. And the Trump administration does not care. We're also going to be highlighting the fact that the U.S. is making some movement, the U.S. military rather, and ramping up the defenses that they're sending to Israel, making it look like they are preparing Israel for war, even though Trump is sitting there saying that there are plans for direct talks between the U.S. and Iran coming up on Saturday. We've got a lot to get to, so let's get started. And let me just say here that I knew that Netanyahu was coming to the White House. This is his second trip to Washington, D.C. since Donald Trump's term began less than 3 months ago. I'd read reports that this trip was at Trump's insistence, so I am trying to figure out what that actually means. We know that Trump announced all of these tariffs on just about the entire world. It seems like he wants a global trade war with everybody. But it was interesting to see the back and forth there because, yes, the U.S. under Trump is even putting tariffs on Israel. Although, as Trump noted, that doesn't really amount to anything given the billions of dollars that the U.S. gives to Israel every single year in support. So I don't see it making that much of a difference. It'll be interesting to see what the reports say if we actually get into it and if those tariffs change at all, because right now the ones that Trump has placed on Israel are at 17%. I know there were some reports out there saying that Israel wants to negotiate them down to 10%. So we'll see. But it was a very oddly laid out meeting. There were reports that we were supposed to get an actual legit press conference where Netanyahu was more involved. Instead, we just got this Oval Office meeting where it was the two of them sitting there with a bunch of other officials and a number of reporters that asked them questions. And all of this is happening as global markets are reeling. And Trump seems to be loving it. He's like, look at all the damage that we're doing to Asian markets. Like, ignore what's happening to our stock markets here at home. If you follow Trump on X or on Truth Social and you've seen his post over the last 24 hours, then you know that he is ranting all over the place and making all sorts of claims saying that, oh, Americans just have to hold on. And I'm like, well, I guess to a certain extent, he is delivering on what he campaigned on, right? He did campaign on this promise of tariffs. He also campaigned on this promise that he was going to drastically lower the cost of living, right? That there were a number of other things rolled into that. So we'll see just how much he is able to actually achieve and how much he decides to actually pursue during this round in office. Now, before we get into the clips from the press conference, I did want to note that while Netanyahu did not say much, he did specifically start out by saying that he appreciates the fact that Trump is a man of his word, right? That he always does what he says he's going to do. And at a time like right now, that is extremely concerning when you take into account the fact that we only know so much of what Trump has said, right? We know what he has said in the public eye. We have no idea what Trump has said to Netanyahu or what he's promised him beyond closed doors. What he said in public is bad enough, right? The threats of war against Iran, the claims that he would fully support and is fully supporting the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. The fact that Trump, and he said it again today, he talked about doubling down on the U.S. taking control of the Gaza Strip, forcing the Palestinians off of their land. Netanyahu added some mumbo jumbo to that I don't believe for a minute about freedom, right? They both love throwing the word freedom around. No one has freedom in the Gaza Strip, and that has nothing to do with Hamas, but that is a different rant for a different day. But the main thing that Trump emphasized, other than all of the tariff talk, was his announcement that the US and Iran were going to have direct talks coming up on this Saturday.
We're dealing with the Iranians. We have a very big meeting on Saturday, and we're dealing with them directly. You know, a lot of people say, oh, maybe you're going through surrogates or you're not dealing directly, you're dealing through other countries. No, we're dealing with them directly, and maybe a deal is going to be made. That would be great.
Now, as a reminder, it's no secret that the US and Iran under the Trump administration have not exactly had the best relationship, given the fact that Trump gets into office the first time around. He pulls the US out of the JCPOA, says we're not doing this nuclear deal with Iran that was brokered under the Obama administration. Oh, and then he goes on to assassinate the revered Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, who was at the forefront of the fight against ISIS. So every time that you hear Trump ranting and talking about how, oh, his administration defeated ISIS, just remember that he went after and killed the main guy who was actually at the forefront of the fight against ISIS. Just keep that in mind when you hear him saying one thing, because that is not the reality of the situation. Now, a reporter then asked him some ridiculous question. I mean, he literally sat there and said, oh, well, you know, what if Iran doesn't agree to a deal? Are you still going to dismantle their nuclear program? Is that going to be something that the US is able to do? And it's like, okay, buddy. And this was Trump's response.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger, and I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
So is that a yes?
You know, it's not a complicated formula. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's all there is.
So
Can't have it.
ready?
Right now we have countries that have nuclear power that shouldn't have it, but I'm sure we'll be able to negotiate out of that too as part of this later on down the line.
And I just love how Trump is sitting there talking about countries that shouldn't have nuclear weapons next to the guy who literally represents the state that has, I don't know, at least 200 undeclared nuclear warheads that we know of, in the sense that they have been reported on, but Israel still will not acknowledge them. And he's sitting there like, just watching this conversation unfold is maddening to watch. I will put it at that, right? Everyone wants to point the finger at Iran and to claim that Iran is the problem. Well, what about Israel and the threat that it's posing to the region? And Trump knows that. Netanyahu knows that. They just want to keep pointing that finger because by all accounts, Iran is their next target. And that has got to be the biggest concern as you're watching the moves that the Trump administration is actively making when it comes to the support that they are showing right now for Israel. As you have reports that the US deployed a second terminal high altitude area defense or THAAD battery to Israel, according to multiple Israeli and media reports over the weekend. And as antiwar.com noted, Israeli security sources also said that the U.S. deployed 2 Patriot air defense batteries to Israel, with U.S. officials previously telling the Wall Street Journal that they were sending Patriot systems to defend U.S. air bases and nearby allies as part of its military buildup in the Middle East that is aimed at Iran. Now, this, of course, comes after the U.S. already sent a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East. And so we are seeing the Trump administration preparing for some sort of an attack. At least that's what it looks like, right? They are preparing for some form of a conflict. Is it an all-out war? We have yet to see. Is it a quote-unquote preemptive strike on Iran and then waiting to see what Iran does in return? Well, that's a major concern right now. And yet Trump is sitting there talking about saying, oh, we're going to have quote-unquote direct talks with Iran coming up in just a matter of days. Now, we have not heard from Iran directly, at least at the time of this recording, but Tehran has said that they would be open to indirect talks. And you have Reuters quoting an anonymous senior Iranian official who said that the talks will not be direct, that it will be with Oman's mediation. So it will be very interesting to see what talks are held. And how they are categorized by Trump versus Iran versus the rest of the world at this point. But we also heard from Trump while he's sitting there with Netanyahu. We heard him talk about Gaza. And it's hard to listen to. It's frustrating to listen to him sit there and talk about this, knowing that the White House came out today and literally said that they stand by Israel, right? That the Israeli massacre of 15 paramedic civil defense workers and a UN staff member that was carried out outside of Rafah in the Gaza Strip, in which Israeli forces literally shot these men. They were wearing uniforms. They were in clearly marked vehicles with their lights on. Israel murdered them in cold blood, buried their bodies in a shallow grave, attempted to destroy their vehicles, and then lied about it. And it was not until we got video footage from one of the men who was murdered that we saw his final moments. We heard him crying out to his mother, begging her for forgiveness. And yet the Trump administration looks at that and they have no problem with it whatsoever. Now, this was actually the topic of this week's episode of Sanctions, so I won't say too much more about that, but just a quick reminder that if you are a paid subscriber on my platforms on Substack or on Patreon, you'll get access to episode 30 and all 29 before it of Sanction, which are available right now. And so, of course, because you have Trump sitting there with Netanyahu, you have reporters asking him about his previous comments that he made about, just ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip of all of the Palestinian people. And this was Trump's most recent response.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate. And I think it's something that we would be involved in. But, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone.
And when I say that this was frustrating to watch, that would be an understatement, because we saw this man sit there back in January and talk about this great ceasefire and hostage release deal that, his team had helped broker between Israel and Hamas. And, it was going to be so great. It was going to get the hostages out. And then, I'm sorry, he's apparently created a freedom zone in Gaza, or that's what he's claiming there's going to be after they forcefully remove all of the hundreds of thousands of people that are remaining there who have just been targeted in a genocide for the last 18 months. Now Trump is talking about how they're going to get together some new kind of deal.
We are trying very hard to get the hostages out. We're looking at another ceasefire. We'll see what happens. But we want to get the hostages out.
And it's like, sir, you literally had a deal and you allowed Israel to break that deal. You allowed Israel to move forward, to kill thousands of Palestinians, to behead. I cannot even begin to count the number of images and videos I have seen on social media of Palestinian children who have been beheaded by Israeli bombs that were made in the USA that are targeting these children in the Gaza Strip. Trump has blood on his hands for every single one of those children that are being murdered by Israel right now. And yet he's just sitting there talking about, we're going to have another deal. No, I'm sorry. He's also ranting and going further. He went on this weird rabbit trail about saying that he met the Israeli hostages that were released, that they came to the US, and that he was asking them of whether or not Hamas members winked at them or gave them extra bread, which I'm guessing that they don't have. I swear, it is so maddening to watch some of these press conferences, and sometimes I wonder why I torture myself with it, because it's like a Trump campaign rally just packaged up in the Oval Office while he's sitting there with Netanyahu, and he's just rambling on about whatever in the hell he wants to because he's the president of the United States. Of course he's going to do that. But then some of those ramblings got into the current U.S. bombing campaign against the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, in Yemen, and this was Trump's latest claim about that.
Been very tough and very successful militarily. We've really damaged them badly. These were people shooting down ships and other things, by the way. flying objects like airplanes. And we've put a major hurt on the Houthis, which nobody's been able to do. We've really hit them hard, and they know it, and they don't know what to do.
Now, the irony of this is, of course, the fact that even the media here in this country, even the New York Times, is admitting once again, the U.S. is bombing Yemen. They're killing dozens of civilians. They're destroying heavily populated civilian infrastructure. Oh, and guess what? They're not stopping the Houthis. And so Trump is sitting there making ridiculous claims. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth then followed up also making ridiculous claims. And it's like, they're just saying whatever they want to say. They're not presenting any evidence whatsoever. And the people who actually have access to evidence are going to the New York Times and telling them, as they remain anonymous sources, that, oh, guess what? These strikes are doing nothing to stop the Houthis. And again, if you want to stop the Houthis, well, then maybe you should stop the blockade that Israel has imposed on humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip, because that's what the Houthis have said would be enough to stop their blockade on certain ships in the Red Sea. Oh, and the other part about all of this that I was kind of frustrated that we didn't hear more about, right? I sat there for 50 minutes, watched this entire thing. Netanyahu started out by saying that he and Trump talked about Israel's concerns about Turkey, right? Because if you look over to Syria, you see that Israel has certainly expanded its bombings of Syria. It's expanded its occupation into Syria. But guess who has also expanded its control in Syria? That would, of course, be Turkey, because Erdogan is the driving force behind the rebranded version of al-Qaeda that is now in charge in Damascus. So apparently Netanyahu was going to Trump, raising concerns about Turkey having too much influence in Syria and saying that, oh, Trump needed to talk to President Erdogan and the U.S. needed to do some mediation there because Trump was so close with Erdogan. And I'm like, I want to know more about that, right? I want to know more about what was said. Of course, Trump did not mention that. I don't even know what his answer was on the one question that he got asked because it made no sense whatsoever. But again, you watch a press conference like this and you go, okay, Netanyahu made an interesting point. Anyone want to follow up on that? Notably, I was not there. So I was not able to ask any questions. I'm just sitting here reacting to what was said. And my takeaways from this continue to be concerned, right? Not just watching what Trump is saying, but watching what the U.S. military is actually doing, watching the U.S. military posture for something. Again, whether that's a U.S. attack, an Israeli attack, a joint attack, let's be real, that's what it would be on Iran, whether that's preparations for an all-out war. And it does make me concerned to think that even though, yes, we have talks, according to Trump, coming up on Saturday, well, as we've seen with the Trump administration, they seem to be so determined to just strong arm the entire world into whatever they want, right? They seem to think that they're going to strong arm Iran into some sort of a deal. And even though there's talks, my concern is that if the Trump administration does not walk out of those talks with exactly what they want, or at least a promise of what they want from Iran, that they could turn to Israel and say, all right, let's move forward with our plans for some kind of an attack. And then we don't even know where that's going to go from there, right? That is when things start to get really concerning. But I can tell you that after watching this press conference, after watching the fact that Netanyahu made yet another visit to the U.S., that nothing good is coming out of what we saw from Washington, D.C. today. And we have a lot more to continue to keep an eye on. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also catch Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.